In today's Leeds news, O'Hare linked with Leeds, Aaronson interview, Klopp return to football could tie to Leeds, and Kristensen disappointed Leeds. Morning folks, Jay here, Friday the 14th of June with your Leeds United news. Hope you're having a good week so far. Last video of the week, there is the podcast that will go out about 6:30 tonight. Myself and Lockie discussing the Brendan Aaronson interview in more detail and some issues around some conversations I should say, around the retained list as we head into next season. But we won't mess around, it'll be a short enough video today. We'll start off with Callum O'Hare interest and a player that we have all spoken about as a player we would love to see come into Leeds this summer, and that is Coventry City's number 10, Callum O'Hare. Last night, Team Talk released a exclusive, so take this with a pinch of salt, that Leeds had joined the race to sign the Coventry City attacker. I say take it with a pinch of salt because Team Talk do get some things right, but their exclusives have tended to be wide of the mark, so just bear that one in mind. But they do say there's an interest from Leeds in the player. O'Hare had 14 goal involvements last season for Coventry City, scoring 9 goals in what was an injury-hit season for the attacker. Team Talk claimed that Leeds, Southampton and Burnley are all said to be interested in a move for the attacker, who has yet to sign a new contract at Coventry and will be out of contract very, very soon. They claim that Leeds have been monitoring O'Hare's situation for quite some time and now Leeds are ready to make their move for the player. O'Hare is probably one of the best attacking players in the Championship. However, his injury record isn't great over the last 2 seasons, and that will be something the Leeds will have to be mindful of if they decide to make a move. But a free transfer for the player might be enough to sweeten any worries they've got about that and bringing the player in. It wouldn't be huge wages, and it would be a free transfer. It would be a very clever move to get that player in. To what Daniel Farke will probably line up in next season of 3 number 10s behind his striker. So it's one to watch. He's a good player, but it is coming from Team Talk, so I would just temper expectations on that. And before anybody tells me that it's not news, this is a rumour and a news channel, all the news, and when we get to Jurgen Klopp, that'll become very clear. Moving on to Brendan Aaronson, and the player has announced his return to Leeds. We've talked about it quite a lot over the last couple of days, but he is returning and we've got to deal with it and move on. But yesterday in The Athletic, they released an interview with Brendan Aaronson that was probably needed to happen after the shock announcement that the player would be returning to Leeds United for a key role next season. In the piece, Aaronson states that he had an awesome conversation with Daniel Farke about the side, his role in the team, and how Daniel Farke sees him fitting into the setup. Aaronson said that he has been working with a nutritionist and has gained 6 pounds of muscle and is very aware of the criticism around his physical presence and wanted to address this. He talked about the style of play that Union Berlin played and how physically draining and physically important it was for them, and he had to adapt to that system, and he is working on that. A return to the Championship, which he has described himself as a grind, is also a physical league that he will need to put that extra muscle on. One of my biggest criticisms of the players was he's self-aware enough to realise that he has to deal with this criticism after comments he made in an interview earlier this season where he didn't see it as a problem. The good news is he clearly is self-aware enough and is addressing the situation. And there is, you will notice if you watch the USA game tonight, he's a little bit bigger, but 6 pounds is not a huge amount, probably a little bit more that needs to go on there, but you don't want to lose the pace that you get from the player either. The interesting part of this interview was a comment he made around something his grandfather said to him when he joined Leeds. Aaronson said that he wanted to be a big player for Leeds United before he then headed off to Berlin, and his grandfather reminded him of this comment that he made and to go back and do what he promised to do. So one of the people in the Aaronson family keeping Brendan honest in this situation, but a comment that I liked to see, and maybe he'll come back with a more determined attitude for next season. His work rate's never been in question. It's always been the physical stuff and whether he wants to be here or not, but he is coming back. It is happening. We have to deal with that. All the other stuff has now been said. We move on from that and we get into concentrating on the player coming back and seeing how committed he is to the club. Moving on to one of the stories that came out this morning that was picked up by a few outlets, and it's a kind of a news story, so bear with me on this. I don't think this is 100% true, but I wanted to talk about it anyway. According to Salzburg Nachrichten, they claim that Jurgen Klopp is being lined up with a shock return to football with a power position within the Red Bull football model. They claim that Klopp is wanted for his management skills, but in a different kind of role that would see him unite their Leipzig, Salzburg, New York and Bragantino clubs with the model that they have with Leeds United in an attempt to create an effective system that would attract top talent to all of those clubs. Klopp is an admirer of the Red Bull footballing system and talked about how they've attracted talented young players from around the world to all of their clubs and how to develop those talent and bring them through. Now, what should be said is other reports in Germany say there's nothing in this, there's not a lot to this, and that the German is planning to stick to his original plan of taking an extended period away from football. There were also reports in Germany today that Dortmund are interested in bringing Klopp back to the club after their manager walked away from the club this week after losing the dressing room. So there's some interesting pieces in there. I don't think there's an awful lot to that in the immediate term. Maybe a longer term process, maybe when Klopp gets a bit older and wants to move away from football into a more development role with clubs, maybe then you see something like that. But if there is the connection around the development of young players and the development process that Red Bull use, that's picked up by Leeds, and the scouting system picked up by Leeds, that would be a benefit for the club, and Klopp involved in that would be very interesting to see. So but right now I don't believe there's a whole lot in that, so we'll leave that there, park it, and we'll move on to the final story of the day, and this one relates to Rasmus Kristensen and Leeds United being disappointed in Kristensen. As I said before, we were all preparing for the return of the exiles and the deserters, whatever way you want to label the players who left Leeds at the end of the Premier League relegation. There is a lot of talk about the immediate return of Rasmus Kristensen to Leeds after a subpar season in Serie A, after serious criticism from the Italian press and now some criticism from the Danish press around his performances. But now Graham Smith has added some detail to this, and he has said that Leeds were left disappointed by the decision that the Dane made to leave the club after relegation. Smith told Inside Elland Road podcast that the £10 million fullback decision to leave Leeds left the hierarchy disappointed after a belief that he would stay and fight. Graham Smith on the situation said the following: "From what I'm led to believe, there were players who Leeds got a sense from or had a sense about that they would stay. They were willing to fight and off they went. They thought Kristensen would stay." He went on to say, "I don't know if it's his fault or miscommunication or Leeds misinterpreting the situation, but it certainly came as a bit of a shock. It was a surprise and a disappointment to Leeds when he toddled off to Rome." So what the reception is going to be for him when he comes back to Daniel Farke. We've talked about the Max Vober situation, and again, myself and Lockie tonight in the podcast, and you'll see it, it's a pre-record. We talked an awful lot about the attitude around Max Vober's "I'm not talking to anybody until July," when it's probably not his call to make. There's a bit of an arrogance in that kind of a statement of "I'll deal with Leeds when I'm ready to deal with Leeds," and unfortunately you don't own your contract, Leeds do, and if Leeds get an offer, Leeds will deal with that immediately, whether you're at the Euros or not. Brendan Aaronson is playing in the Copa America, and he has dealt with his future immediately and got that sorted. What should also be said about Brendan Aaronson as well is, if you look at his history, when Leeds signed him initially, that was announced the day after the season had finished at Leeds that we had signed Brendan Aaronson. If you look at when he went to Union Berlin, it was pretty much a couple of days after Leeds had been relegated that it was announced that he was heading to Union Berlin. And now that Union Berlin's season has finished, Aaronson's announced he's coming back to Leeds pretty immediately. He seems to be a player who decides his future very quickly and then focuses on that for the summer, something Max Vober and Rasmus Kristensen are not so keen to do. And you wonder, is that around some of the potential responses or reaction that they will get if and when they return to Leeds United next season, not just from the club but from the dressing room. Max Vober gave a very clear indication he was going to stay at Leeds last season, did the photo shoot, and there was a lot of talk about the conversation he had with Daniel Farke and the possibility that Vober would be the captain for the season. And then when Gladbach came in, off he went to Gladbach. So it could be a frostier reception for a couple of players coming back. Obviously, Brendan Aaronson never had that conversation with Daniel Farke, so probably a little bit immune in that position. But it's got to be an interesting one. I think Leeds need better right backs than Rasmus Kristensen. Yes, he'd probably be fine in the Championship, but is he the player you want to have in that team? And does Daniel Farke want him? And that's going to be a big part of this, but it'll remain to be seen, and we'll find out more in the next couple of weeks. The transfer window is officially open today. I don't expect an awful lot of movement. Adam Pope has said, don't expect anything immediately. Just wait. The free agents are very interesting to me. There's a lot of good players, Callum O'Hare being one of those as well. It'll be interesting to see what Leeds do in the free market as well, if they dip into it at all. It would be some smart signings in there if they were to consider it. Debo Reeve, Ryan Sessegnon, although injuries, and Callum O'Hare as well could sort some positions for Leeds for nothing outside of wages. It'd be an interesting one to see. So I'll leave it there, folks. The podcast will be out at 6:30 tonight, myself and Lockie. Keep an eye out for that if you're interested in it. If you're not interested in that, I'm back Monday morning for more Leeds news. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you on Monday. See you. Bye.